In the fall of 1987, a quiet street in Richmond, Virginia, woke to the sound of sirens and the sight of one house engulfed in flames. Firefighters pulled a single body from the debris, respected businessman, dead before anyone could help. The fire was ruled accidental. The case closed and life moved on. But 12 years later, a forgotten VHS tape surfaced in a city archive. The footage had nothing to do with the fire. Yet within its frames lay the key to everything investigators missed. It didn't expose a killer directly. It dismantled the illusion that had protected him. What began as a small-town tragedy would soon unravel into a calculated crime buried under ashes and lies. September 1987, Richmond, Virginia. The Southside District was an ordinary residential area of small brick houses and trimmed lawns, home to working families and small business owners. On the night of September 19th, the neighborhood on Springdale Street was quiet until residents heard a dull sound, followed minutes later by the crackle of fire. At 9:54 p.m., a call reached the fire department reporting smoke from house number 47, owned by local businessman Melvin Clark. When firefighters arrived, flames were already spreading through the kitchen and corridor. The fire had moved fast but burned in isolated sections as if it had been guided. Within 30 minutes, the blaze was contained. Near the front door, responders found the body of Melvin Clark burned beyond recognition. The initial fire report identified the ignition point in the kitchen, listing a likely electrical malfunction. The coroner's preliminary opinion recorded death during the fire. With no immediate sign of foul play, the incident was processed as a domestic accident. For Richmond police, it was routine. Electrical fires were frequent in older houses, but details around the victim's life did not fully fit the conclusion. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Clark, age 44, did not smoke, lived alone, and had completed a full renovation just a month earlier, including replacement of wiring and appliances. His finances were stable, and he was known as cautious and orderly. He had no debts, no disputes, and no criminal record. The only source of tension in his life came from his business. Clark co-owned Eastline Contractor Supply, a company providing construction materials and machinery rentals across Central Virginia. His two partners, Kenny Holloway and Raymond Brooks, managed operations. Through the mid-1980s, Eastline grew steadily, but internal pressure had built. By late summer 1987, Clark wanted to sell his share and withdraw from the firm. He informed both partners that he expected payment for his third, approximately $1.6 million. Company records showed that Eastline lacked that amount in liquid assets. The meeting that followed reportedly ended in a heated argument. 1 week later, Clark was dead. Investigators questioned Holloway and Brooks as part of routine follow-up. Both men said they had spent the evening of the fire at a birthday party, hosted by a friend, Sam Reed, across the city. Their statements were nearly identical. Several guests confirmed having seen them there, though none could provide precise times. Because their alleged presence was supported by multiple people, the police treated the alibi as reliable. The timeline placed them 20 minutes from the scene when the fire began, with no contrary evidence. The case was closed within 3 weeks. The official conclusion read, cause of fire, electrical failure in kitchen area, classification, accidental death. The report went to the city archive. Few noticed two overlooked details. The fire investigator had noted separate burn origins in the kitchen and corridor, and the autopsy summary contained no description of the skull's condition. Those inconsistencies were minor on paper, but they would later become crucial. For the moment, the matter was finished. Clark's house was cleared and demolished. His property insurance processed the loss without dispute. The company he helped build continued operating under his partners. Eastline Contractor Supply kept its contracts, re-registering ownership 6 months after his death. Public attention faded quickly. To the community, Melvin Clark's passing was a domestic tragedy, a man overcome by fire in his own home. Still, one detail persisted in neighborhood recollections. Residents of Springdale Street remembered that the fire began without explosion or loud noise. Only the sound of voices raised an argument shortly before the smoke appeared. No one reported it at the time. It seemed insignificant compared to the chaos of flames and sirens. But those few minutes before ignition, the quiet argument, the sharp thud and the unnatural stillness that followed were the last unexamined moments of Melvin Clark's life. For the next 12 years, the file marked Fire Casualty 47. Springdale Street remained closed, its pages undisturbed in storage. No one suspected that one day, a simple recording from the same night would Challenge every line written in that report and turn an accidental fire into evidence of murder. In the spring of 1999, 12 years after the fire that destroyed Melvin Clark's home, the Richmond City Archive launched a project called City on Tape. The goal was to digitize aging VHS cassettes donated by residents. Most of the footage that arrived showed ordinary moments: family dinners, community fairs, local parades. Among the submissions, one tape carried a handwritten label that read, "Reed's birthday, September 19, 87. It had been delivered by an older man who explained that his son had recorded it during a family gathering years earlier. The label was ordinary, but the date would soon attract attention. Technician Derek Brown, responsible for converting the old tapes, placed a cassette into a playback deck and began recording the transfer. What appeared on the monitor looked unremarkable: an apartment filled with people talking and laughing, faint background music, and the clutter typical of a casual celebration. The camera drifted between the living room and kitchen, showing guests holding plates and drinks, a birthday cake on a table, and balloons pinned to the walls. On the counter sat a digital clock that clearly showed 9:15 p.m. The camera continued to roll for nearly an hour without interruption. When the tape ended, the same clock displayed 10:10 p.m. Brown logged the recording, noted that it represented domestic life, 1980s, and forwarded the cassette to the archival cataloging department. During the cataloging process, archivist Laura Jenkins reviewed the labels and cross-checked dates against city historical records. The date on the Reed tape matched one in the municipal database: September 19, 1987, the night of a residential fire on Springdale Street that had resulted in a fatality. The name was familiar from a summary she had read while indexing past incident files. Melvin Clark, businessman, accidental fire, case closed the same year, although there was no reason to believe the home video had any connection to that tragedy. Archive protocol required the staff to flag any footage taken during the time frame of a notable event. Following procedure, Jenkins sent a digital copy to the Richmond Police Historical Evidence Division for record comparison. When police technicians examined the video, they immediately recognized the relevance of the name Reed. In the 1987 report, two men, Kenny Holloway and Raymond Brooks, had claimed to be at the birthday party of a friend named Sam Reed on the very night Clark's house caught fire. Their alibi had been accepted at the time, supported by witnesses who said the men were present during the evening. The new recording offered a chance to verify that account in detail. The footage played continuously from 9:15 to ENT p.m., the exact window in which emergency logs recorded the fire call at 9:54 p.m. Every moment of the party was visible: guests entering, conversations around the table, a toast for Sam Reed's birthday. The camera never stopped and faces were identifiable. When cross-referenced against the names from the original witness list, all known attendees were visible except Holloway and Brooks. Their absence was not ambiguous. They were simply not there. No one mentioned them by name. No shadow or voice suggested their presence. The recording contradicted the foundation of their alibi. Technicians documented the findings in an internal memorandum. The Reed tape, though domestic in nature, overlapped precisely with the timeline of the 1987 fire. It recorded a full 55 minutes of real time, eliminating the possibility that the two men could have attended the gathering at any point during the incident. The memo noted the absence of editing cuts and confirmed that the timestamp corresponded with television audio heard faintly in the background, matching the 900 p.m. broadcast from a local Richmond station on that date. The evidence was subtle but verifiable. Within days, the police archive formally registered the recording as potential supplemental material to case file 870919. It did not reopen the investigation by itself, but it introduced an inconsistency impossible to ignore. The newly digitized home video stored unnoticed for 12 years had revealed that two men once cleared of suspicion could not have been where they claimed to be. A simple birthday recording had become a silent record of absence, one that, for the first time in over a decade, challenged the official version of how Melvin Clark died. By 1999, the death of Melvin Clark was still recorded as an accident. The file described an electrical fire, nothing more. But the rediscovered home video had changed that. When investigators compared the 1987 incident log with the newly digitized footage, timelines collided. The fire department's dispatch records showed that the first 911 call reporting smoke at 47 Springdale Street was received at 9:54 p.m. The birthday video recorded that same night captured continuous footage between 9:15 and 10:10 p.m. During that entire 55-minute window, the two men who had sworn to be President Kenny Holloway and Raymond Brooks were nowhere to be seen. The contradiction was undeniable. The discrepancy was enough to bring the file back from storage. The Richmond Police Department transferred the original report to the cold case unit. The case landed on the desk of Detective Tony Wilkins, a 48-year-old investigator known for his precision and skepticism. He did not believe in coincidences, and he rarely reopened archived cases without measurable cause. But this one contained too many gaps to ignore. The first step was procedural. Review every document as though the case had just been assigned. Wilkins began by requesting the full 911 dispatch log from September 19, 1987. The call for the fire came at 9:54 p.m. and the first response unit reported arrival at 10:02. He then retrieved the original fire investigation file, the coroner's preliminary report, and the crime scene photographs stored in the evidence vault. The photos taken before the body was removed revealed something inconsistent with a simple kitchen fire. There were two distinct burn origins, one in the kitchen, another in the corridor near the front door. Each appeared to have started separately, not from the same electrical source. The configuration suggested intentional ignition rather than malfunction. The coroner's file raised further questions. It contained no mention of skull examination, no diagram of injuries, only a summary that listed thermal destruction, possible smoke inhalation. The absence of any reference to head trauma was unusual. The 1987 examiner had recorded severe burns, but had not confirmed the cause of death beyond fire-related. Wilkins noted the omissions carefully. The cumulative inconsistencies began to form a pattern. He turned next to witness statements. The party guests, the neighbors, and the partners all had been questioned briefly in 1987. Many of those interviews had not been recorded. Only typed summaries existed. Wilkins tracked down the individuals still living in the area. Two of the former party guests admitted that they had confirmed Holloway and Brooks's presence at Sam Reed's birthday simply because others said they were there. The recollection 12 years later was faint, but their uncertainty reinforced the doubts raised by the video. A more valuable testimony came from a surviving neighbor, Eleanor Price, who had lived next door to Melvin Clark. In 1987, she had been interviewed, but her comments never appeared in the final report. She told Wilkins that she remembered hearing raised voices outside Clark's home around 9:20 p.m. followed by heavy sound like furniture hitting a wall, and then silence. A few minutes later, she smelled smoke. She had mentioned this to officers the morning after the fire, but her statement had never been filed. Wilkins retrieved the original call sheet from that day and confirmed her name. On a list of neighbors contacted, but not formally documented, piece by piece the evidence began to converge. The video disproved the alibi. The neighbor placed an argument at the scene 30 minutes before the fire. The photographs showed two fire origins. Each element, viewed separately, was inconclusive. Together, they pointed toward deliberate staging. Wilkins prepared a summary request for a court order authorizing exhumation of Melvin Clark's remains for re-examination. The affidavit cited probable cause based on new evidence contradicting the 1987 findings. In the spring of 2000, the Richmond Circuit Court approved the petition. The exhumation was conducted under official supervision. When the casket was opened, the forensic team recovered the skull intact enough for reanalysis. A clean fracture was visible across the occipital bone, consistent with impact from a blunt object. Microscopic inspection indicated perimotium trauma and injury sustained before death, not caused by heat. The pathologist continued cross-checking archived hospital materials. In a storage box at the city morgue, they found preserved microscope slides from the original autopsy samples of lung tissue prepared in 1987. When re-examined under modern equipment, the samples showed no traces of soot or carbon particles, confirming that Clark had not inhaled smoke. He had been dead before the fire began. The fire was no accident. It had been constructed to conceal murder. Wilkins documented the findings in a new report and submitted it to the prosecutor's office. After 12 years, the official classification of Melvin Clark's death shifted from accidental to homicide. The tape from 1987, silent for over a decade, had turned into the document that forced the city to reopen the past. With court approval, search warrants were issued for the homes of Kenny Holloway and Raymond Brooks and for the office archives of Eastline Contractors Supply. The search at Eastline began early in the morning, supervised by forensic document officers. The building, now under different ownership, still contained the old filing cabinets in a basement storage room. Inside one drawer labeled 1987 transactions held the original folder marked Clark Agreement. The papers appeared in order, stamped and signed describing a buyout of Clark's 1/3 ownership dated September 20th, 1987, the very morning after the fire. The document looked legitimate, but on close inspection, the detective noticed uniform flaws and several typed characters, small mechanical distortions repeating across lines. That detail was enough to send the entire folder to the State Laboratory for Technical Analysis. The results left no ambiguity. The forensic typist identified the paper as having been printed on an Olympia model typewriter purchased for the Eastline office in February 1988. It was physically impossible for that machine to have produced a document dated the day after Clark's death. The notary seal confirmed the deception. The stamp bore a commission, number first issued in 1988. The listed notary provided a written affidavit verifying that she had not yet been licensed in September 1987. Together, these details established that the agreement was falsified and backdated, executed months after Clark's death to simulate a voluntary sale. While laboratory testing continued, Wilkins revisited witnesses whose statements in 1987 had never been properly documented. One of them, Delane Porter, still lived 2 houses from Clark's former property. She recalled that at approximately 9:20 p.m. on the night of the fire, she heard voices on his porch, loud, urgent, followed by a heavy sound like something striking a wall. Minutes later, she smelled smoke. In 1987, she had told the dispatcher only about the fire, uncertain whether her memory was accurate. Now her full statement was recorded officially, and her timeline precisely matched the 911 call log. It placed the disturbance half an hour before firefighters arrived, consistent with the window in which Clark likely died. The next lead came from Bernard Tate, a former Eastline mechanic located through employment records. Tate remembered that one day before the fire, Kenny Holloway came into the workshop asking to borrow a heavy steel lever used for loosening engine mounts, because Holloway said he would return it the next morning. The transaction was never written in the tool log. The item was never returned. The forensic pathologist later confirmed that the linear fracture found on Clark's skull matched the profile of a narrow, heavy object such as a prior. Tate's statement became one of the strongest links connecting physical evidence to the suspects. Wilkins also reviewed the 1987 fire photographs with a certified fire examiner. They noted such streaks running along the corridor ceiling, but the upper kitchen cabinets remained nearly clean. The smoke detector above the stove had an empty battery compartment. The expert explained that an accidental kitchen fires said deposits spread evenly through vents and shelves. Here the pattern showed directed ignition and interference with the alarm system. The conclusion was recorded in a new technical report confirming signs of deliberate staging. Each discovery tightened the chain of evidence. The forged contract proved a cover-up. Witnesses established time and motive. Forensics identified both manipulation of the fire scene and physical assault preceding death. Wilkins compiled the findings into a consolidated brief for the prosecutor's office. With the case now reclassified, he moved to question the 2 men once treated as mere witnesses. Both Holloway and Brooks appeared composed during initial questioning, repeating their original statement that they had spent the evening at Sam Reed's birthday party. Wilkins knew that defense by repetition could no longer stand. He presented them with a continuous video from 9:15 to 10:10 p.m. showing every guest except them. He followed with a forensic report proving the 1987 agreement had been typed and notarized months later. The evidence dismantled their version piece by piece. Under pressure, Raymond Brooks's composure began to erode. He requested to speak privately with the prosecutor about potential cooperation. It was the first tangible shift in 12 years. The case that once ended in ash was finally beginning to reveal who struck the fatal blow and how a calculated fire had been used to erase it. The cooperation agreement between Raymond Brooks and the prosecutor's office formally redefined his position in the case. In exchange for full testimony and documentary corroboration, Brooks received limited immunity from the most severe charges. Every statement he made was verified through records, forensic data, and witness accounts collected since the case reopened. Investigators began by cross-checking his narrative against tangible evidence, reconstructing the final hours of September 19, 1987 with precision. Brooks confirmed that he and Kenny Holloway had arranged to meet Melvin Clark that evening to discuss Clark's planned exit from Eastline Contractor Supply. The meeting was scheduled for 8:45 p.m. The notation K plus R 2045 found in Clark's personal planner matched Brooks's description exactly. According to his testimony, the discussion turned volatile when Clark insisted on immediate payment of his 1.6 million share. Brooks said that Clark accused Holloway of concealing assets and falsifying invoices. Voices rose and the confrontation escalated near the front entrance. Brooks described hearing the sharp sound of impact as Clark fell backward inside the hallway. The description aligned with the medical findings: an occipital skull fracture consistent with a single blow from a blunt narrow object. The forensic record strengthened Brooks's account. The archived microscopic lung slides from 1987 showed no traces of soot, confirming that Clark had not inhaled smoke. He was dead before the fire began. The technical report from the fire division corroborated further details. Investigators had discovered that the smoke detector's battery was missing, and that fire patterns originated in both the kitchen and corridor in arrangement, impossible under accidental conditions. When compared with Brooks's statement that Holloway removed the battery and spread ignition points to simulate an electrical failure, the data matched precisely. Timeline reconstruction followed. The 911 call was logged at 9:54 p.m., 8 minutes after neighbors first saw smoke. The home video from Sam Reed's apartment recorded continuously from 9:15 to 10:10 p.m. Every guest at the party was visible and identified by name. Holloway and Brooks were absent from the entire sequence, not briefly or partially but completely. The footage formed a continuous record that eliminated the possibility of their presence anywhere other than Springdale Street during the window of the fire. Brooks's testimony, the video, and the dispatch logs aligned without contradiction. The neighbor, Elaine Porter, recalled hearing raised voices at approximately 9:20 p.m. followed by heavy impact and then the first signs of smoke precisely when Brooks placed the fatal blow. Each component now fit into an unbroken sequence. The confrontation began shortly after 8:45 p.m. Clark was struck at around 9:20. The perpetrators disabled the smoke alarm, staged the fire by leaving a pan of well heating on the stove, and used a rag to extend the flames toward the hallway to disguise the origin point. They left the scene before 9:45. At 9:54, a neighbor's emergency call triggered the first responder dispatch. The entire chain of events, once fragmented by assumptions and missing evidence, was now chronologically complete and supported by cross-verified records. The financial motive closed the final gap. Clark's death erased his claim to the 1.6 million owed from East Lines' assets. In theory, his share should have passed to his next of kin or been settled through legitimate purchase. Instead, investigators uncovered a typewritten buyout contract dated September 20th, 1987, the day after the fire, but proven through forensic analysis to have been created months later, using office equipment and a notary seal not available until 1988. The court's financial analyst concluded that this was a deliberate attempt to legalize the unlawful acquisition of Clark's share after his death. It was not speculation but documented falsification. The next review focused on roles. Brooks's statements were not accepted at face value, but measured against the cumulative record. He identified Holloway as the one who delivered the blow, claiming he panicked afterward. Investigators correlated this with Bernard Tate's account that Holloway borrowed a steel pry bar the day before the fire. The fracture pattern on Clark's skull matched the profile of that tool. Combined with the absence of any alternative source for the injury, the sequence gained factual solidity. Brooks's description of leaving the pan on the stove, removing the battery, and placing a cloth on the burner was reviewed by the fire examiner, who confirmed that the spread pattern of soot and flames down the corridor was consistent with intentional distribution. After Brooks's cooperation agreement was signed, the investigation reached its final stage of verification. Detectives summoned Kenny Holloway for a new interrogation, this time as a primary suspect facing formal homicide charges. He was presented with the complete sequence of evidence: Brooks's signed testimony, the verified timeline, the forged documents, the tool report, and the fire analysis. The evidence package was accompanied by certified expert statements, leaving no factual gaps for dispute. Holloway reviewed the materials in silence, occasionally consulting with his attorney. When asked to address the inconsistencies in his previous alibi, he declined to provide any statement, citing his Fifth Amendment right. His refusal was documented in the official transcript. Investigators noted that no portion of Holloway's original version aligned with the physical or forensic findings. The case file recorded the interview as non-responsive, establishing that, in contrast to Brooks's cooperation, Holloway's silence became the final confirmation that the chain of evidence was complete. The final reconstruction, prepared for the prosecutor's office, left no missing intervals. It relied on physical exhibits, time logs, and verified testimony. The video footage, the 911 records, the archival microlides, the exhumation results, the fire technical report, and the forged documents, all aligned in a cohesive chain. In early 2001, the Richmond Commonwealth Attorney's Office formally filed charges against both defendants. Kenny Holloway faced counts of first-degree murder, arson, and falsification of commercial records. Raymond Brooks was charged as an accessory, with reduced charges in accordance with his cooperation agreement. The defense attempted to revive the decade-old alibi, claiming that the home video was incomplete and might have contained pauses or edits. The prosecution's video technician dismantled that claim, testifying that the recording ran continuously from 9:15 to 10:10 p.m. without any breaks or discontinuities. Sam Reed, the apartment owner, provided his original guest list, which corresponded exactly with the faces visible in the footage. No trace of either Holloway or Brooks appeared on the tape. The prosecution's next step was to establish physical cause of death. Forensic pathologists presented detailed reports from the 2000 exhumation, demonstrating a clear occipital fracture, consistent with blunt force trauma. They displayed preserved microscopic lung slides from 1987, showing no evidence of inhalation, proving that Melvin Clark had been killed before the fire started. In parallel, the civil court invalidated the falsified buyout contract and ordered restitution of Clark's business assets to his estate. The judgment explicitly cited that under Virginia law, no statute of limitations applied to homicide or major felony offenses, making the passage of time irrelevant to punishment. The final ruling contained no rhetoric. It simply listed facts: homicide before ignition, arson for concealment, and falsified records for gain. Yet behind those words stood the weight of method to patience of detectives, the precision of forensic work, and the endurance of evidence that outlasted memory. A simple home recording, never meant to prove anything, brided 12 silent years and turned an unsolved accident into a documented crime. In the end, it wasn't confession or coincidence that closed the case. It was verification,